It was almost real, the Pro Wrestling History Podcast, episode 82. Hello and welcome to this episode of It Was Almost Real, the Pro Wrestling History Podcast. My name is Ken Zimmerman Jr., and this is the podcast dedicated to the history of professional wrestling between 1870 and 1930. And in this episode, I will be talking about an Illinois Select Committee's investigation into professional boxing and professional wrestling in Chicago, Illinois, and also the Illinois State Athletic Commission in 1927. In this part one, we will discuss the revelations that made Joe Stecher look bad. And in part two, which I will record for next week, we will talk about the revelations that made Billy Sandow and Ed Strangler Lewis look bad. But first, as you can hear, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat this week. My grandsons have been kind enough to share a cold with me again, so I'm doing my best under the circumstances, and I hope you'll forgive the raspiness in my voice this week. So my first introduction or update is not a recommendation, because I don't know if I'm going to recommend the show or not, but I started watching Heels, Heels, the Stars series on professional wrestling on Netflix this week. And I was predisposed to like this show because, one, Stephen Amell plays the main character, Jack Spade, who is the owner, promoter, and booker of a small Georgia independent promotion that his father had owned. And the other main character is his younger brother, Ace Spade, played by Alexander Ludwig, who played Bjorn Ironside in my absolutely favorite historical drama of all time, Vikings. With that said, being predisposed to like it, within the first 10 minutes of the show, they turned me off. And what they turned me off on is Jack is supposed to be coming up with the finish for this feud he's been booking for a while between him and his younger brother. His younger brother is the face, Jack is the heel champion of the company, and the outcome is supposedly going to be Ace winning the championship from his brother, but his brother is struggling with whether he's going to do that or not. All that is fine for the drama of the series. Everyone keeps asking the wrestlers, Ace, is the script ready yet? Is the script ready yet? And I know Stephen Amell is a big wrestling fan, and they had some wrestling people on the show, so you would think the director or the producer or the writers would have at least consulted one of them to realize that when you start using the word script with professional wrestling, you are insulting and annoying a lot of people inside the wrestling business. It annoyed me, and I'm only a historian. I'm not an insider. I've never been in the wrestling business. A lot of people who knew absolutely nothing about professional wrestling, when they used to degrade it, one of the things they would always say is, well, you know that stuff, they're always just following the script. They can't go away from the script. First of all, they don't write scripts for wrestling shows because, particularly in the days of kayfabe, if anyone got a hold of that script, your business would be exposed. And even the WWE, which is probably the closest thing to a scripted wrestling program, and their promos are heavily scripted, does not refer to their formats as scripts. They are the format for the wrestling show. And they continue to use this throughout the first couple episodes. So that already had put me off. And then I'm going to give you a spoiler for the first episode. I won't give spoilers for the rest of it. But in the very first episode, at the end of it, Jack double crosses his brother, beats him in the ring within like 6 to 10 seconds with a legitimate wrestling hold, because his brother was being scouted by so this is an independent promotion. So think of Jack's father's ex-partner as a scout for like the World Wrestling Entertainment or AEW. And he is going to sign he's going to sign Ace up for their developmental program. And Jack does not believe Ace is mature enough or ready for this opportunity, which he could be right about. But you let your brother screw that up. You don't take the opportunity away from him by double crossing him and then killing your promotion because you just killed your top baby face. And the series is about how he tries to recover from that. That's the other problem I have with the series. I'm not finding hardly anyone in this show that is a sympathetic character that you're rooting for. Jack is kind of annoying. Ace is very annoying. Most of the... And they should have some sleazy characters in this show because professional wrestling attracts unique characters, and it's always been a bit of a dirty business. So that part of it is fine. But it would be nice to find someone in the show that's actually worth rooting for. There's a young girl who's a valet and who I think is going to end up becoming a wrestler. She's kind of sympathetic because she seems to know the business, but everybody just ignores her because she's a young girl. Willie's a little bit on the sympathetic side, but she's hardened by the business. She's not as sympathetic as you really want in a hero or a heroine for the show. And even their mother is kind of annoying. So this is a difficult show for me to find some redeeming people to like. It has got very good ratings. The critics love it. And Netflix purchased it from Starz, who had canceled the series after season 2. They've put the first 2 seasons on Netflix. And if the series does well on Netflix, Netflix has talked about commissioning the third series or season for this show. If I'm committed to watch the first season, and I'm in episode 4, I think. So if this changes and I do find something redeeming about the series, I'll probably watch the first 2. They're 8 episodes apiece, so it's not a whole lot of time you're investing in the show. But it may move to my recommendations if I see something that I'm not seeing now. But right now, it's just kind of an update of what I'm looking at right now, and more to come. The Divided Championship is about 3/4 to... Oh, it's mostly done. I mean, I've got about a few months left to cover before the unification match, and then I want to do a post-unification match, particularly focused on Joe Stecher. And so I'm anticipating that'll take me another month, and I intend to release the Divided Championship hopefully in the first week in June 2025. So for the main content this week, it kind of flows from the Divided Championship book I'm working on into the content for this week and next week, because this may have been what was the impetus for Stecher and Lewis to finally end the Divided Championship era. So far, I've covered the first 2 years of the Divided Championship in my research, and the box office has not been adversely affected by the confusion caused by 2 top wrestlers claiming to be world champion. I think I was a little surprised by that because I always had heard prior to doing the research for this book that the reason that they did end the Divided Championship was, one, box office was negatively affected, which I'm not seeing at all, and that Stecher pretty much retired the championship and barely defended it, whereas Lewis was a very active champion and was acting like he had never been anything but the world champion. That the match with Munn in January of 1925 in Kansas City had not really occurred. None of that is correct. If anything, Stecher was more active than Lewis, and they both actively defended their versions of the world title up until the reunification match. So anything about, Stecher was afraid of double crosses, and he had been had 2 double crosses pulled on him during that almost 3-year period that the championship was divided, but it didn't mean that he defended the title any less. He was as active as Lewis was when it comes to defending the championship. But something happened in June of 1927 that brought a lot of discredit to both professional boxing and professional wrestling in Illinois. And these are the kind of things that the promoters just quaked in fear of during the kayfabe era, because the one thing that they thought would just kill their business is if people knew that the wrestlers were cooperating with each other to put on entertaining matches, particularly when they were still allowing gambling, and a lot of promoters made a lot of money off of gambling. They were scared that that would just kill their business. And in June of 1927, one of those situations occurred, which was completely outside of their control. This was not Jack Pfeffer going to the newspaper because he was mad about being pushed out of the current monopoly controlling wrestling. This was an Illinois State Select Committee of the Illinois State Legislature. They embarked on an investigation of the Illinois State Athletic Commission and were really focused on professional boxing and professional wrestling in Chicago. And the subcommittee held a series of hearings, and by the time they were done, they suspended the boxing and wrestling license of over 130 athletes, as well as some promoters. This week I wanted to discuss the allegations against the Stecher camp. So I hope you cannot hear the background noise. One of my neighbors decided it would be an opportune time to cut their grass at the end of March, right when I'm trying to do the podcast. So if there's any background noise in the back, I do apologize. While Lewis was embarrassed, so was Stecher. And Stecher was embarrassed because one of the first people they interviewed from professional wrestling, the committee interviewed, was a gentleman by the name of Martin Slattery, who had been a promoter in wrestling in Chicago in the 19-teens. He really started moving around the country as the manager for John the Nebraska Tiger Man Pesek. He managed Pesek from his early days in professional wrestling up until Pesek joined with Sandow's management promotional group, in 1922. Pesek stayed with them until 1925, but he got kind of irritated over having to take care of Wayne Big Munn's opponents when they had put the belt on Munn, so he left and he went back to Slattery for almost a year, and then he rejoined Sandow's group in September or October of 1926. So Slattery had been his manager and moved around the country quite a bit after being the promoter in Chicago. And while he was not, at the time that the committee interviewed him in 1927, currently managing anyone, he was a wrestling referee in Nebraska, which was his hometown, along with Pesek and Stecher. And Slattery told the committee that the wrestling trust controlled professional wrestling, and the trust had been divided, so now you had different groups in charge of different areas of the country. And Representative Gullis, who was the committee chairperson, asked Slattery who controlled wrestling. Slattery answered, "Jack Curley controls wrestling in New York. Billy Sandow and his younger brother Max Bauman control wrestling in Illinois and in the South. And the Stecher brothers control wrestling in the West." Which actually they controlled some wrestling in the Midwest and some wrestling in California with the help of Carnation Ludero. Gullis further asked Slattery if he knew of any fixed matches, and Slattery said yes. Joe Stecher's April 22nd, 1926 title defense against John Pesek was a set-up affair. Slattery further told the committee that Joe Stecher, which it wasn't Joe Stecher, it was Tony Stecher, made Pesek put up $16,000 as a forfeit if Pesek double-crossed Stecher. Pesek also had to guarantee an automatic rematch. Now, most of Slattery's testimony is factual. There are a couple of things, though. He gets the date wrong on the match. The match was not April 22nd. The match was April 29th, 1926, because it was in St. Louis. And it was Tom Pax, the St. Louis promoter, who set up that match. So it was either Tom Pax or Tony Stecher who demanded the $16,000 forfeit to guard against a double cross, not Joe Stecher. Joe Stecher was not involved in those negotiations. So to make up that 16,000, Slattery had to help Pesic mortgage his Ravenna, Nebraska farm, which got him 5,000, which he was able to add to create the $16,000 guarantee. He had 9,000, but he had to mortgage his farm to produce the other. I said 5,000. It was 8,000. So he had half. He mortgaged the farm for 8,000. Came up with the $16,000 guarantee. However, when the men arrived in St. Louis, Pesic said that he was still going to double cross Joe Stecher. It was always his intention he was going to double cross him. But when they got to St. Louis, Tom Pax held a meeting with Pesic. And in that meeting, Pesic decided, no, I'm not going to double cross him. And Pesic would double cross him later on in Los Angeles in October of 1926, but he originally intended to double cross him in the April 1926 match, but he changed his mind. And the reason he changed his mind was Pax had substituted the referee. So Pesic was worried if he had tried to double cross, the referee might realize what was going on and find a reason to disqualify him, which is actually what happened in the double cross in Los Angeles. The other thing that concerned him was Pax told him, if you go off script and try to double cross Pesic, I'm going to have you suspended by the Missouri State Athletic Commission. And Pax had enough pull with the Missouri State Athletic Commission that he could have gotten Pesic suspended. And this was a big deal because Pesic originally was suspended for life by the New York State Athletic Commission in November of 1921 after the legitimate contest that he had with Marin Plastina devolved into a foul fest. And he was still under that lifetime suspension in New York. Normally, that would have prevented him from wrestling in most other places in the country, definitely anywhere that had an athletic commission. But fortunately for Pesic, Chicago, the city of Chicago, had its own athletic commission in 1922. They decided not to follow New York's ban and allowed Pesic to wrestle in Chicago. Chicago's commission allowed him to wrestle throughout the United States in most places. He was still banned in New York. There were other towns. I don't think he wrestled in Philadelphia until a year or two before they lifted the New York ban. He was able to wrestle in the Midwest, in the South, in many places because Chicago did not recognize New York's ban, which most athletic commissions did. Pesic rightly feared that if the Missouri State Athletic Commission also suspended him, then it was likely with two state athletic commissions suspending him or banning him that he would no longer be able to wrestle anywhere in the United States. So he decided to go along with the match finish. And Pax told him that you will pin Stecher after about 3 hours of wrestling with a double arm wrist lock. Stecher will pin you in about 45 minutes with the body scissors. And then you will jump out of the ring and get yourself disqualified for the third fall so Stecher wins the match. And that all went according to plan, except Pesic didn't jump out of the ring and get disqualified. He fell out of the ring, and I put fell in quotes. He fell out of the ring and struck his head and was unable to continue. So Stecher won the match on a withdrawal instead of a disqualification. And that set up 2 return matches in Los Angeles. So, of course, Tony and Joe Stecher deny all of this occurred, but the revelations are such that it is enough that it still embarrasses them to the point where they start thinking about maybe it's time to end the divided championship and schedule the long-awaited reunification match. At the same time, and we'll talk about this next week, revelations from another witness cast aspersion and doubt on Billy Sandow and Ed Strangler Lewis, who are now also motivated to end the divided championship era. So this all occurs in June of 1927. By August of 1927, both the Stecher and Lewis camps are talking about reunification. So in next week's episode, I'm going to talk about the revelations and how they concern Lewis and Sandow. But this week, I just wanted to focus on the Stecher and the Stecher camp revelations. Having Pesek or any shooter hooker put up guarantees is nothing new, particularly in the 20s and 30s when double crosses were rife. It was fairly common for promoters to be concerned about a wrestler going into business for himself. So they would make the wrestler that was supposed to lose put up a large guarantee that if he double crossed the other wrestler, that he would have to forfeit that money to the other wrestler in the promotion over the double cross. Jim Landis, who was the biggest star of the 1930s, would not get in the ring with Lewis for their huge match in Chicago, which drew 34,000 fans, without Lewis putting up $50,000 in 1934, saying he would not shoot on Landis because Landis knew he had absolutely no chance against Lewis in a contest. And this happened time and time again. Later on, when the double crosses were pretty much a thing of the past, the person who was going to be the world heavyweight wrestling champion also had to put up a forfeit, but that forfeit was to cover two things. One, that they didn't lose the championship belt, which was not cheap to replace, so that was part of what that forfeit was for. The other part of that forfeit was to make sure that they would go along with what the promoters told them. So we gave you the belt now, you're going to drop the belt when we tell you to. And they were still putting the belt on mostly guys that could take care of themselves, like a Jack Briscoe or a Harley Race, up until Ric Flair. When Ric Flair got the NWA Championship, that's the first time in a while, probably since Buddy Rogers, where they put a title on somebody who was more a pure performer. So the whole thing about putting up guarantees is not new, but they definitely did not want that information to get out into the public. And it did appear to be something that they were all very concerned about, even though it wasn't affecting the box office, because even after these revelations came out, Stecher drew 10 or 12,000 fans to a match in Boston. 18,000 fans to a match in Boston. So it wasn't hurting the box office yet, but they definitely were scared that it was going to hurt the box office. And so that was probably the real impetus to end the divided championship era, not the smaller houses, which never occurred, or the fact that one was very active and the other one was very inactive. They were both very active in defending their titles. So I've got one recommendation for this week. This is a match I actually saw a few years ago, and it's from Mexico from 1990, and it's Conan versus Perro Aguayo. It is not the mask versus hair match. That would be a little bit later. This is a match that was called, the comment on the video is mano y mano. Conan is wearing a white mask for this match. I was pleasantly surprised because I've seen some lucha matches, which is a lot of flying and not a whole lot of story. This match I saw hard hitting and told a story that I found interesting. So I wanted to recommend that match. That's really the only the only recommendation I have. I did finish John Cosper's book. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, excellent book. And you can view the show notes for this episode at kenzermanjr.com/episode 82. I'm going to go into a little bit of wrestling news before I end the program. I know not everybody loves the modern wrestling, so if you're not interested in that, I will see you next week. As always, I appreciate the reviews on iTunes or wherever you listen. That helps keep the program visible, and it helps people find the show that haven't listened to it or heard it or found it. And for you that want to check out now, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a great week. For those that want to hear about the wrestling news, And the first one is John Cena's promo on Raw. And this promo was to try to explain why he turned on Cody Rhodes after the Elimination Chamber at the behest of The Rock. This should have been a victory lap for one of the biggest stars in professional wrestling as he wrestled his last year. And instead, they're booing the guy who has more Make-A-Wish visits than any other person in history by a long shot, and they're booing him out of the building. And there were some Cena cheers when he first came out, and there were people in the audience wearing his new t-shirt. But the reaction for the most part was boos, and of course they're siding with Cody in this. Cody, the biggest baby face in a long time. And Cena goes into a long, drawn-out, 15-minute soliloquy where he not only complained about the fans that used to boo him, and Cena always got a mixed reaction. He didn't get a mixed reaction from me because I wasn't watching. He was the world champion during the period of time when I had checked out on professional wrestling, and I only watch it now because I do a podcast on wrestling history and I do try to keep up with what's going on now. Cena was in that period of time I wasn't watching. But I do know from my brother-in-law who never quit watching that Cena got a very mixed review. People loved him, people hated him. I don't know why people necessarily hated him. Maybe they didn't like that he was too goody two-shoes, but seemed to be a decent enough person in real life. So he goes into this monologue about why he doesn't, why he's mad at the fans and why he turned on Cody. It was a lot of whining. None of it made a whole lot of sense. He tried very hard to pull off this new persona and try to convince people that he was mad at all of them and that's why he turned. But it just wasn't believable. I'm not buying it. My favorite was he not only took shots at the fans who've always booed him, but he took shots at the Cena fans, the people that were buying his t-shirts. So there were a lot of people in Belgium wearing his t-shirts, his new t-shirts. And he's pointing out to them, yeah, you're the problem, you're the problem. He points out to that kid over there. Here's this little 12-year-old kid with a completely perplexed look on his face because I'm sure he's thinking, why is this large man who was my hero yelling at me because my parents dropped 40 euros on this shirt? What did you do for me? Well, they bought your new shirt. That's what they did for you. They put all that money in your pocket. It doesn't come off as believable. Even though he tried really hard, you got to give Cena credit for trying to go with this thing. I don't know why he said yes to this. He should have said no. This was ill-advised. So Cody comes out and destroys him in about a 2 to 3 minute promo after Cena had been out there for like 15 minutes. And he was out there for almost 20 minutes. But there was a lot of booing, a lot of fan reaction, which he was milking. So he probably spoke for 10 to 15 minutes. Cody spoke 2 to 3 minutes, completely blew him out of the water, overshadowed him, and left. I am not looking forward to this WrestleMania main event. I think it's been a big miss by WWE Creative, but I bet you they had little choice after The Rock decided once again to stick his nose into WrestleMania for the second year in a row. So that's it for this episode of It Was Almost Real, the Pro Wrestling History Podcast. In the next episode, I'm going to cover part 2 of the revelations by the Illinois State Select Committee that was investigating professional wrestling and boxing. KenZimmermanJr.com is a place to check out the show notes for today's episode. You can also see what I'm working on currently. There's an archive of a lot of past articles on professional wrestling. And if you're interested in digging deeper and want to check out my books, there's an Amazon author page link up in the top navigation bar. I've already talked about sharing or rating us on iTunes and other places you listen. So if you'd like to comment on this episode or ask a question, you can always go to the KenZimmermanJr.com and go to the contact page and send me an email. Love to hear from you. I love getting feedback about the show and about my work in general. And until next time, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.